Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description. Hello everybody, today I continue my week of classic cars courtesy of my good friend Doug, who's invited me to his lovely B&B in Shillington on the Hertfordshire-Bedfordshire border and put me in touch with a few of his classic car loving friends. Yesterday I drove a 108-year-old Cadillac, and today I'm driving the definitive British classic car, the Mini. But there is a small problem. I know what the Mini is. I know what it did for the world of motoring. I know it is an icon. But just like somebody who says, I don't really like the Beatles, I've never really liked the Mini. However, I am not a man unafraid to change his mind. So in today's video, I'm going to be telling you about why it is that I've never really been that fascinated with it, what I'm driving today, why it is so special, and whether it's good enough to convince me that the Mini is actually a car that I not just respect, I like. Enjoy. The Mini landed in 1959 and became the icon of the 1960s because anybody and everybody wanted one. It was all things to all people, and it didn't matter whether you were a student who needed cheap transportation or a rock star. You could have a Mini. And the Mini was one of those truly revolutionary cars which not only was a style icon, it also featured some genuine innovation, particularly in terms of packaging, allowing it to provide you with a genuine, for the 1960s, four-seater, complete with a boot. This is not a traditional hatchback, an engine up the front, and which is only 3 meters long and 1.4 meters wide. It was available at a very low price point, weighed almost nothing. These cars started at around 600 kilos, so lighter than an original Lotus Elise. And, likely because of this, they also became incredibly popular in the racing world, with Minis scoring victories everywhere from the touring car track to the rally stages of Monaco. This, I think, is a car whose universal popularity has never been matched. Even in a decade such as the 60s, populated by other enduring icons like the Jaguar E-Type, the Mini really stands out. And I have always respected it. I've always been aware of what it is, what it's capable of, and what it means to so many people. But why do I not care for it? Well, that's down to a few different things. First off, as you can probably tell, I'm not exactly small. I do fit in this thing absolutely fine. You need to move the seat back, but it's no problem whatsoever. The pedals are a little narrow, but I'm used to that with most classic cars. And it's very, very easy to drive. It feels genuinely very modern. Likely helped by the fact that the stuff I was driving yesterday was twice as old. Visibility is excellent because the A, B and C pillar are paper thin. This one has a sunroof, we'll get onto that in a little bit, and to be honest, right here and right now it's actually quite enjoyable. And it's also reminding me of the very car in which I had my first ever Mini experience, and likely the one that put me off the brand forever. That was my dad's 1966 Cooper, also in the same shade of red with a black roof. Now, he'd purchased this about 20 odd years ago on a bit of a whim. At the time, they didn't command much money at all. He bought it off some young lad who put a set of silly wheels on it, got it, put the correct ones on, and then effectively did nothing with it. In the time he owned it, though, it doubled in value. So he said to me, James, can you go over to the storage unit, take some photographs of that, and also the Ferrari that he was thinking of selling as well, his 355. I didn't care for the Mini, but I was very, very upset at the notion the 355 might be going, because at that point in time, I hadn't driven it. So I went over there, got in the car, and the chap who'd been storing it said, right, I've got it started, but there is a bit of an issue with it. So the choke, I've had to put a little clothes peg in. That's a very common old school trick to keep it where it's supposed to be. The car was already running as he was trying to warm it through, and he said, by the way, you are going to need a little bit of throttle, because if you don't, it will die. Okay, fine. Problem with an old Mini, there is no synchro mesh on first, so you had to rev the thing up a little bit, then try and put it into gear, which naturally would crunch. So you sat there going brum 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 brum, and then as I was on a gravel driveway, I'd spin the wheels, which made me feel fairly bad all round. So you sat there going brum 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 brum, and then it decided it didn't want to stay in gear. It was popping out of first. So I was sat there trying to move this thing up a very short, brief sort of, I don't know, 20 yards worth of hill, going brum, 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 brum. I think I moved that car a sum total of about 40 yards, slammed the door shut, took my photographs and swore at it. The 355, meanwhile, the 20-year-old Italian supercar, which at that point in time hadn't turned a wheel for 2 years and has a reputation for being a difficult, curmudgeonly thing that'll hate you for fun, well, I got in that, turned the key, it fired into life, I drove it up the hill, took my photographs, and it didn't miss a beat. Happily, the 355 stayed around, partly because I think I might have told him that if he sold it before I could drive it, I'd never forgive him. The Mini went though, and honestly, I wasn't bothered at all. But a number of years later, now doing YouTube, I finally got a chance to drive one. And this was a much later example, when it was the Rover Mini. You see, any car that's in production for 41 years is going to go through some changes. And the Mini, in its time, has been known as simply the Mini, also the Austin Mini, the Morris Mini, to some the BMC Mini. And today, you find me behind the wheel of a 1975 Mk3 Mini. But this one is a little bit special. Now, if today's video does inspire you to head towards the classifieds in search of your perfect Mini, don't forget to use CarVertical, the super-powered super search that will cross-reference a number of databases from around the globe to give you all the information you want to know on any potential used car purchase, including previous accident damage, mileage discrepancies, involvement in fire, theft, or, as unlikely as it seems, outstanding finance. You need just 60 seconds of your time and either a VIN or registration number. Even better, for 20% off the service, don't forget to use my discount code JayEmm. I tell you the Unicorn Mini that I'm trying to find. It's an early 90s special edition called the Red Hot. My mum had one and she had to sell it because my pram wouldn't fit in it. If anyone's got one of those that I can just drive, I would love to, because it would mean a lot to me and to her. You see, here's the thing with the original Mini. Like I said, everybody wanted one. And so the thing is, when it comes to a car like this, the way the company building it can make it cheap is by limiting their variation. So though there were some options for the original Mini, there weren't all that many. And if you wanted a Mini but wanted to stand out, well, you had to take it to somebody else. And so, very quickly, an industry sprang up modifying Minis. Some for performance, some for cosmetics. One of the best known was Radford, and it was in fact a later recreation of a Radford that I drove a few years ago. This is from likely their biggest rival, Wood Pickett. It was known as the Margrave, and it was effectively whatever you wanted. Researching this has been very, very difficult because the idea of the whole thing was that the car was as unique as its customer. So there isn't really such a thing as a standard Wood and Pickett car. To give you an example, the easy way that many people identify a Wood and Pickett car is by the little bull bar on the front and on the back. But this one doesn't have those. What it does have instead is the cut-in-half front end of a Vauxhall Victor. That's why this doesn't look at all like a Mini up the front. Shockingly, the bonnet, I'm told, is actually a Mini item from a Clubman. That front end is almost unrecognisable, isn't it? It doesn't have that rounded profile that you'd expect of a Mini. For me, I think I would rather the original looks, but I also respect what this car is. It was basically the max power of its day. And in keeping with max power traditions, as far as we're aware, the mechanicals of this car are totally standard, which here means the top of the line 1275cc engine making some power, how much we don't know, and a 4-speed manual gearbox. For this, the Mark III, introduced in 1969, Mini did away with the old hydroelastic suspension setup that they'd introduced a few years earlier. That was a very clever and compact system, which did improve ride, but ultimately just cost too much. So for this, they reverted to the standard rubber cone affair, which gives it a very rustic ride quality. This car, as you've also likely spotted, has a vinyl roof, very 1970s that, and our Basto sunroof, a period-correct addition. People put these in Rolls Royces, E-Types, everything. Sometimes I don't really mind, like in this, although I'm confident it's not done the structural rigidity any favours. Other times you just look at it and think, oh my, what were they thinking? It is, however, arguably inside where your biggest changes are to be found for the Wood Pickett, where we've got a bespoke dashboard here in walnut. I've seen some where they're covered still in leather. You've got electric windows. This, incidentally, is another thing that changed for the Mark III. Previously, in a Mini, they were sliding items. For the Mark III, they were then drop down, but windy. Here, the electric is then an aftermarket edition. And just in case you're wondering, the other main thing that changed for the Mark III Mini is the doors, which are slightly larger, and the door hinges themselves are now hidden away. Which, actually, to be honest, I almost don't like, because it now looks a little bit awkward. I kind of prefer the look of the original Mini, which is then very much of its time. All of the switchgear in here was part of the Wood Pickett packet, as is the steering wheel. The leather on this one is in fact original. These Recaro seats are taken from a Ford Capri and are actually really quite nice. They even fit in here just about all right. The seat belt is manually adjustable. I'm not such a big fan of that, but it is what it is. And maybe the best thing about this car is the story behind it. Its owner, Maureen, has been in love with Minis from the very start. Her first car was a Mini, her second car was a Mini, and today she owns several of both the old and new variety. About 25 years ago, one of her neighbours was a car dealer, and with her sons then being approaching their teenage years, she said, if ever you do come across a classic Mini, I'd love to buy it, because I think I'd like to get my sons into the whole old Mini thing and maybe make one of them their first car. Now, she figured this was going to take a number of years, but just 3 weeks later he turned up with this gorgeous maroon Mini, and she looked at it and said, that's lovely, but I thought this would take you an awful lot longer. So they wound up selling the car to a friend of theirs who had it for about 5 years, but unfortunately didn't look after it. It then wound up languishing at the back of a garden. However, Maureen, fortunately or unfortunately, had worked her magic, and one of her sons went to go and buy the car. She told him not to do it because it was in such a state that she knew it was going to cost far too much to get it roadworthy again. By the time she got home, though, it was already on their driveway. And there it sat for a number of years, until finally her son realised he wasn't ever going to get it done. By this point, he was now married and had children, and so he sold it to his dear old mum for a nominal fee. Then her partner Keith, also very much into his cars, owner of 2 TVR Griffiths, decided to start the work himself. And about 10 years ago, the project began, and the car is now in the condition you see it today. Where possible, as many of the original parts have been kept. The colour has been changed to this gorgeous red, which I think suits it down to the ground, and the maroon wasn't even original anyway. On the logbook, apparently it's yellow. Though, of course, it is very possible that the car was repainted maroon a long time ago. And so, here and now, on these lovely little country roads, what's this car like? Celebrating now its 50th birthday? Does it still have the magic? Let's find out. Yeah, all right. I quite like this. Look, I'd never want one of my children driving one of them. I mean, I don't have children, but that's by the by. These are utterly and totally lethal. Oh, Fiat Barchetta, nice. A cyclist going at a fair lick would cut this car in half. I'm going very slowly over these speed bumps too, because this exhaust, which is a later edition, does hang a little low. Not quite as low as the previous one, but still, it can catch over these bumps. The gearbox, now I've worked out where all the gears are, is actually very pleasant, and the steering, wonderfully direct. Now the overall pace just isn't that high, but that's okay. It's entertaining, it's engaging. I think one of the other issues I've always had with these cars is the fact that people talk about them like they are the fastest thing ever, and they're not. They feel quick, but they aren't quick. And of course today people want an increasingly daft amount of money for these things. I'm not exactly sure how much one of these is worth, and to be honest, I'm not even sure Maureen and Keith would know, because they've had it for over 2 decades. It's worth a lot more now, I'm sure, than it was then. But to them, that's not the point. It's their car, they love it, and they're keeping it. The compact size of it, combined with relatively good practicality, does mean that if you were in the mood to use one of these day to day, you definitely could. The biggest problem really with stuff like this is the fact that they're still not that valuable, which means there are still a lot of these out there that are hiding some fairly serious issues. From this seat, the car makes a lot of sense. From that seat, not so much. And I'm driving this on roads where we're doing about 40 to 50 mile an hour. If I had to commute in this thing, or get up to motorway speeds, I'd very, very quickly fall out of love with it. And as for this particular example, I'm just not keen on the front end at all. The interior modifications I like, the roof I love. But this was the point of the Wood Pickett. It was whatever you wanted. And that's something I think that we're missing from the modern car world. I'd love to see a little bit more of this personalisation and customisation come out. But unfortunately, the world of finance has kind of killed that. I can't imagine VW Finance being very happy if you tell them that you've cut the front end of a Polo off and put a Porsche Boxster on there. It's not going to go down well, is it? I also should mention the fact that a little while ago I got to experience a couple of race-prepped Minis going around to the Goodwood circuit, and that was truly spectacular. I think that day alone gave me a vast amount of respect for the thing. And I will be very willing to concede that maybe my first impression of the Mini really did help to ruin it. Though today I find myself liking it a bit more. I don't think I'm in love with the thing. I'm really enjoying driving it, and in James's imaginary unlimited budget car cave, I'd have an old school Mini, because it is an iconic thing. I'm just not in love with it, and that's okay. I respect it. I don't have to love it. Although, give me another hour in this, and I might change my mind. Give me another 5 hours in it, and I'll probably change my mind again. But that's okay. That's the world of cars. And I think if everybody started realising that you don't have to like everything that everybody else does, the whole world would be a better place. Nonetheless, I am very grateful to Maureen and to Keith for bringing their car out, to Doug for playing Automotive Cellar Black, and to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.